The alarm rings. Your hand reaches out almost automatically to hit the snooze button. Just 5 more minutes, you tell yourself. Those 5 minutes turn into 15, then 30, and before you know it, an hour has slipped away like sand through your fingers. Deep inside, a voice whispers about the dreams you harbor. Dreams so magnificent they sometimes keep you awake at night. Yet here you are, choosing the comfort of your warm bed over the pursuit of those very dreams. That's the fascinating paradox we're going to explore today, the peculiar relationship between ambition and laziness that exists within so many of us. It's like having a sports car with a powerful engine, but never putting fuel in it. The potential is extraordinary, but without action, it remains just that. Let me share something with you about human nature. We are the only creatures on this planet who consciously work against our own interests. Think about that for a moment. A lion doesn't decide to skip hunting because it's feeling lazy. A bird doesn't put off building its nest because it's waiting for the perfect moment. Yet we humans, with our remarkable capacity for imagination and achievement, frequently choose immediate comfort over long-term fulfillment. Have you ever wondered why we do this? Why do we simultaneously hold these two opposing forces within us? The drive to achieve greatness and the pull toward inaction? The answer lies deeper than simple laziness. It's rooted in our fundamental nature as beings capable of both extraordinary achievement and remarkable self-sabotage. Consider the countless moments when you've felt that spark of inspiration, that burning desire to create something meaningful, to build something lasting, to become someone remarkable. In those moments, your mind races with possibilities. You see yourself achieving your goals, standing at the summit of your personal mountain. But then something happens. The mundane reality of daily life creeps in. The effort required to bridge the gap between where you are and where you want to be suddenly seems overwhelming. And so you retreat. You tell yourself you'll start tomorrow, next week, next month. You convince yourself that you're just waiting for the right moment, the perfect circumstances, the ideal situation. This is where the real battle lies, not between ambition and laziness, but between the story we tell ourselves and the reality we're willing to face. The truth is, ambition without action is like a car without wheels. Impressive to look at, but ultimately going nowhere. Let's delve into what's really happening when we choose inaction over progress. Our brains are wired to conserve energy, to seek the path of least resistance. This was once a survival mechanism, helping our ancestors preserve energy for crucial moments. But in today's world, where our challenges are more often mental than physical, this ancient programming can become our greatest obstacle. The irony is that the energy we spend avoiding work, making excuses, and dealing with the guilt of procrastination often exceeds the energy required to simply do the work itself. We exhaust ourselves running away from the very things that could energize us, fulfill us, and bring us the success we claim to want. You might recognize this pattern in your own life. Perhaps you have a business idea that you've been nurturing in your mind for years, but you've never taken the first step to make it real. Or maybe you dream of writing a book, but you've convinced yourself that you need to wait for inspiration to strike. These are not just dreams deferred. The cost of this pattern isn't just in the opportunities we miss or the goals we fail to achieve. The real cost is in the slow erosion of our self-trust. Every time we break a promise to ourselves, every time we choose comfort over growth, we chip away at our belief in our own capacity for achievement. We create a gap between who we are and who we know we could be, and that gap becomes a source of constant, subtle discomfort. But here's what's fascinating about this whole situation. The very fact that you feel this tension, this pull between ambition and inaction, is actually a sign of your potential. People who truly lack ambition don't struggle with this conflict. They don't feel the weight of unrealized potential because they've never acknowledged that potential in the first place. You feel this tension precisely because you are capable of more. Your ambition, even when it seems at odds with your actions, is trying to tell you something important about yourself. It's like an internal compass, pointing toward your true north, even when you're not following its direction. Think about your relationship with exercise. Most people know they should exercise regularly, and many even buy gym memberships with genuine intentions to use them. Yet how many of those memberships go unused? The desire for health and fitness exists alongside the tendency to avoid the very actions that would bring about these desired results. This isn't just about physical fitness, it's a perfect metaphor for how we handle our ambitions in general. What makes this situation even more complex is that we live in an age of unprecedented distraction. Our devices ping constantly with notifications, social media feeds offer endless scrolling, and entertainment is available at our fingertips 7/7. These modern comforts make it easier than ever to choose the path of least resistance, to postpone our dreams in favor of immediate gratification. The most dangerous thing about this pattern isn't the time we waste, or even the opportunities we miss. It's the stories we begin to tell ourselves. Stories that become self-fulfilling prophecies. We start to identify with our inaction, to wear it like a badge. I'm just not a morning person, we say. I work better under pressure. I'm good at coming up with ideas but not at following through. These seemingly harmless self-descriptions become the bars of our self-made prison. But what if I told you that laziness, as most of us understand it, doesn't actually exist? What if what we call laziness is actually fear wearing a convincing disguise? Think about the last time you procrastinated on something important. If you dig deep enough beneath the surface-level excuses, you'll often find fear lurking there. Fear of failure, fear of success. This realization is both liberating and challenging. Liberating because it means we're not inherently flawed or broken. Challenging because it forces us to confront the real issues holding us back. It's much easier to label ourselves as lazy than to acknowledge that we're afraid of not being good enough, afraid of succeeding and having to maintain that success. The truth is, your ambition isn't your enemy, and your perceived laziness isn't your true nature. They're both messages from different parts of yourself, trying to tell you something important. Your ambition is showing you what's possible, while your resistance to action is highlighting where you need to grow. Let me share something profound about human psychology. We don't actually resist work. We resist emotional discomfort. When you find yourself procrastinating, pay attention to the emotions that come up when you think about taking action. Are you afraid of not meeting your own high standards? Are you worried about what others might think? Are you uncertain about whether you're taking the right approach? This understanding changes everything. Instead of beating yourself up for being lazy, you can start getting curious about your resistance. Every time you feel the pull toward inaction, it's an invitation to look deeper, to understand yourself better, to grow stronger. Consider how often we use busyness as a shield against meaningful action. We fill our days with minor tasks, responding to emails, attending unnecessary meetings, scrolling through social media, all while telling ourselves we're too busy to pursue our real dreams. This isn't laziness, it's avoidance. We're not doing nothing, we're actively doing the wrong things to avoid facing our fears. The path forward isn't about forcing yourself to work harder or implementing yet another productivity system. It's about understanding the deeper dynamics at play and making peace with the part of you that resists change. This doesn't mean giving in to inaction, quite the opposite. It means learning to work with your nature rather than against it. Think about water for a moment. Water always follows the path of least resistance. Yet, over time, it can carve through solid rock to create magnificent canyons. What if we could approach our ambitions with the same fluid persistence? Instead of trying to force our way through resistance, what if we could learn to flow around obstacles, gradually but inexorably moving toward our goals? This brings us to a crucial truth. Transformation doesn't happen in giant leaps. It happens in tiny shifts, in small decisions made moment by moment. The gap between where you are and where you want to be isn't crossed in one heroic bound. It's crossed by building a bridge, one plank at a time. Every time you choose action over inaction, no matter how small that action might be, you're not just moving toward your goals, you're rebuilding your relationship with yourself. You're proving to yourself that you can be trusted, that you can follow through, that you can handle the discomfort of growth. The real challenge isn't finding the motivation to start, it's learning to continue when the initial excitement fades. This is where most people get stuck. They wait for inspiration, for the perfect moment, for everything to line up just right. But those who achieve their ambitions understand that action precedes motivation. Think about the last time you really didn't want to exercise but did it anyway. How did you feel afterward? Probably energized, proud, maybe even eager to do it again. This is the secret that successful people understand. Action creates energy, motion creates emotion. You don't have to feel motivated to start, you just have to start. But here's where many of us get tripped up. We think we need to feel ready to take action. We wait for confidence to arrive before we begin. But confidence isn't something that appears magically. It's built through action, through proving to ourselves that we can handle challenges. And the relationship between ambition and action is like a dance. Sometimes you lead with vision, sometimes you follow with small steps. But the key is to keep moving. The moment you stop moving, doubt creeps in, fear takes hold, and inaction becomes increasingly comfortable. Consider how often we use perfectionism as an excuse for inaction. I'll start when I have the perfect plan, we tell ourselves. I'll launch when everything is just right. But perfection is just another form of fear masquerading as high standards. The truth is, nothing will ever be perfect, and waiting for perfection is just another way of choosing comfort over growth. The most profound truth about human potential is that we all have an infinite capacity for growth, but a finite capacity for willpower. This is why relying on motivation alone is like trying to fill a leaking bucket. It might work for a while, but eventually you'll run dry. The key isn't to find more willpower, it's to need less of it. Think about the things you do without hesitation every day. Brushing your teeth, taking a shower, checking your phone. You don't need motivation for these actions because they're habits. They're part of who you are. This is the secret to bridging the gap between ambition and action. You need to make progress a habit, not a choice. But here's where most advice goes wrong. We're told to make massive changes, to completely overhaul our lives overnight. Wake up at 5 a.m., exercise for 2 hours, meditate for an hour, read a book a week. This approach isn't just unsustainable, it's actually harmful. It sets us up for failure and reinforces the very patterns we're trying to break. The real path to transformation is through tiny, consistent actions that barely register as effort. Want to write a book? Start with 1 sentence a day. Want to build a business? Spend 5 minutes each morning brainstorming ideas. Want to get in shape? Do 1 push-up every time you enter your bedroom. These micro-domains might seem ridiculous at first. After all, how can one sentence lead to a book? How can one push-up lead to fitness? But this misses the point entirely. The power isn't in the action itself. It's in the identity shift that occurs when you prove to yourself, day after day, that you're the kind of person who takes action toward their goals. Consider this: every time you take action, no matter how small, you're casting a vote for the person you want to become. Every time you choose inaction, you're casting a vote for staying the same. Over time, these votes add up to create your identity. And your identity shapes your actions far more powerfully than any amount of willpower ever could. This brings us to another crucial understanding. The way we talk to ourselves matters more than we realize. When you catch yourself avoiding important work, how do you respond? Do you berate yourself for being lazy? Do you make excuses? Or do you get curious about what's really going on? The language we use with ourselves creates the reality we live in. When we label ourselves as lazy, we're not just describing our behavior, we're creating a self-fulfilling prophecy. Instead of saying, "I'm lazy," try saying, "I'm choosing not to take action right now." Instead of, "I can't do this," try, "I haven't figured out how to do this yet." This shift in language might seem subtle, but it's profound. It moves you from a fixed mindset to a growth mindset, from feeling trapped by your nature to feeling empowered by your choices. It reminds you that you're not your behaviors. You're the consciousness that observes and directs those behaviors. But let's talk about something that rarely gets discussed in conversations about ambition and achievement: the role of rest. We live in a culture that glorifies hustle, that treats rest as weakness and relaxation as laziness. This mindset is not just unhealthy, it's counterproductive. True productivity isn't about constant action, it's about rhythmic movement between effort and rest, between pushing forward and pulling back. Just as your heart doesn't beat constantly, but pulses with rhythmic precision, your energy and focus need to flow in natural cycles. The problem isn't that you need rest, it's that you're not resting effectively. Scrolling through social media isn't rest. Binge-watching TV isn't rest. These activities don't rejuvenate you, they just numb you to the discomfort of unfulfilled potential. Real rest, deep, purposeful, guilt-free rest, is as important to achievement as focused action. This understanding transforms how we view the relationship between ambition and what we call laziness. What if those moments of apparent laziness are actually your body and mind telling you something important? What if instead of fighting against these moments, consider how often we ignore our body's signals, push through fatigue, and then wonder why we can't sustain our momentum? True ambition isn't about overriding your body's wisdom. It's about learning to work in harmony with your natural rhythms and energy cycles. The most successful people aren't those who never feel resistance or fatigue. They're the ones who have learned to listen to these signals and respond appropriately. Sometimes that means pushing through, but often it means stepping back, recalibrating, and approaching the challenge from a different angle. This is why the traditional approach to motivation often fails. We wait to feel motivated before we start, not realizing that motivation is a result of action, not a prerequisite for it. The key is to make starting so easy that it requires almost no motivation at all. Instead of saying, "I'm going to work out for an hour," say, "I'm going to put on my running shoes." Instead of saying, "I'm going to write a chapter," say, "I'm going to write one sentence." Instead of saying, I'm going to clean the whole house," say, "I'm going to clean for 5 minutes." And once you start, something magical happens. The resistance that seems so overwhelming when you were thinking about the task often disappears once you're in motion. This is because your brain is wired to complete what it starts. It's called the Zeigarnik effect. Unfinished tasks create mental tension that your brain wants to resolve. But here's the key. This only works if you truly make the initial step small enough. Most people fail not because they can't do what's necessary, but because they make the entry point too challenging. They try to revolutionize their entire life overnight instead of focusing on tiny, manageable. Think about compound interest in finance. A small percentage gain, consistently repeated, eventually creates massive results. The same principle applies to personal growth. Small actions, consistently repeated, create massive transformation over time. This is where most people get tripped up. They underestimate the power of small actions because they can't see the immediate impact. They're like gardeners who dig up their seeds every day to see if they're growing, not realizing that this constant disruption is precisely. The truth is, most meaningful change happens below the surface, invisible to outside observers and often even to ourselves. Just as a bamboo tree appears to do nothing for 4 years while developing an extensive root system, and then suddenly grows 90 feet in 6 weeks, our own growth often follows a similar pattern. This understanding should transform how you view those periods of apparent inaction. Sometimes what looks like laziness is actually integration. Your mind and body processing the changes you're making, preparing for the next phase of growth. But here's the catch. You can't know in advance which small action will lead to a breakthrough. You can't predict which day of showing up will be the one that changes everything. This is why consistency matters more than intensity. It's better to take small. Think about water dripping on a rock. Any single drop appears to have no effect. But over time, with enough consistency, water can carve through solid stone. Your small, consistent actions have the same power. They're literally reshaping the landscape of your life. This brings us to another vital truth: the importance of celebrating small wins. Your brain doesn't know the difference between a small accomplishment and a major achievement. It releases the same reward chemicals either way. When you acknowledge and celebrate small progress, you create a positive feedback loop that makes future action more likely. But most of us do the opposite. We discount our small achievements, focusing instead on how far we still have to go. We treat our goals like a destination rather than a direction, not realizing that this mindset makes the journey feel overwhelming and progress. What if instead of measuring yourself against some distant ideal, you measured yourself against where you were yesterday? What if instead of focusing on the gap between where you are and where you want to be, you focused on the gap between where you are and where you used to be? The most profound shift happens when you realize that the path to achieving your ambitions isn't about becoming someone new. It's about uncovering who you already are beneath the layers of fear, doubt, and learned helplessness. Your ambition isn't some external force pushing you toward a goal. It's your authentic self trying to emerge. Think about a time when you were completely absorbed in an activity, maybe playing music, solving a problem, creating something, or helping someone. In those moments, time seemed to disappear and action flowed effortlessly. That state of flow wasn't something you had to force. It emerged naturally when you aligned your actions with your true nature. This is the secret that changes everything. What we call laziness is often just misalignment. When you're pursuing goals that truly resonate with your core values, when you're taking actions that align with your authentic self, resistance naturally diminishes. It doesn't disappear completely. Nothing worthwhile comes without some challenge. But the quality of the resistance changes from a wall to a weight. But here's what no one tells you about transformation. It's not just about adding new behaviors. It's also about letting go. Letting go of outdated self-beliefs, of limiting beliefs, of the comfort of familiar excuses. Letting go of the need for certainty before taking action. Letting go of the myth that you should always feel motivated and energized. The path forward isn't about becoming superhuman. It's about becoming more fully human. It's about embracing your contradictions, working with your nature rather than against it, and understanding that periods of action and rest are both essential parts of the growth cycle. Consider how a snake must periodically shed its skin to grow. During this process, it's vulnerable, uncomfortable, and might appear inactive. But this apparent inaction is actually a crucial part of its development. Your periods of seeming laziness might serve a similar purpose, not as permanent states to remain in. The real transformation begins when you stop seeing yourself as broken and start seeing yourself as evolving. When you understand that every moment of resistance is an opportunity for growth, every impulse toward procrastination is information about what needs attention, and every experience of fear is an invitation to expand your comfort zone. Think about how many times you've beaten yourself up for not taking action, only to find that the self-criticism made it even harder to move forward. What if instead of fighting against your nature, you learned to work with it? What if instead of demanding perfection, you aimed for progress? What if instead of waiting to feel ready, you decided to begin anyway? The truth is, you don't have to feel passionate about every step of the journey. You don't have to love the process every day. You just have to keep showing up, taking small actions, and trusting that these actions, compounded over time, will lead you where you need to go. Remember this, every great achievement in human history was accomplished one step at a time, by people who weren't always sure to do it, who didn't always feel motivated, who sometimes wondered if it was worth the effort. What set them apart wasn't your ambition isn't your enemy, and your perceived laziness isn't your truth. They're both parts of a greater whole, teaching you something important about yourself and your path forward. Your task isn't to eliminate one and embrace the other, but to understand both and find the wisdom they contain. As you leave here today, don't try to revolutionize your entire life overnight. Don't make grand declarations about everything you're going to change. Instead, ask yourself one simple question. What's the smallest step I could take right now toward what matters most to me? Then take that step. Not because you feel motivated, not because you're sure it will work, not because you know where it will lead, but because moving forward, even imperfectly, is better than standing still in fear of imperfection. Remember that every moment offers a new choice. Every sunrise brings a new opportunity to align your actions with your ambitions. You don't have to wait for permission, for perfect circumstances, or for absolute certainty. You just have to begin, again and again, one small step at a time. The path to realizing your ambitions isn't a straight line. It's a series of spirals, each one taking you higher than the last, even when it feels like you're covering familiar ground. Trust this process. Trust that every small action builds momentum. Every moment of rest serves a purpose, and every challenge you face is strengthening you for what's ahead. You are not here by accident. Your ambitions are not random wishes, They're calling cards from your future self, inviting you to grow into who you're capable of becoming. The tension you feel between where you are and where you want to be isn't a curse, it's a blessing. It's the force that will propel you forward if you let it. So let it begin now. Not with a dramatic declaration or a complete life overhaul, but with a single step, one small action, one tiny choice, one moment of choosing growth over comfort, progress over perfection, movement over certainty. Because in the end, the distance between your ambitions and your actions isn't bridged by motivation, willpower, or grand gestures. It's bridged by small steps taken consistently, with trust in the process and faith in yourself. Your time is now. Not because you feel ready, but because you're alive. Not because the conditions are perfect, but because this moment is all you ever really have. Not because success is guaranteed, but because growth is inevitable when you choose to begin. Take that first step, then another, then another. The path will unfold before you, one step at a time, as it always has, as it always will. Your ambitions are waiting. They've been waiting all along, not for you to be perfect, but for you to begin.